Welcome to techCast, the podcast that quenches curiosity, powered by Q&A Marcom. techCast, where we deep dive into the exciting world of technology, bringing you the latest trends, innovations, and thought-provoking discussions. Join us on this exciting journey as we explore the boundless possibilities of technology.
Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of techCast powered by Q&A Marcom. My name is Swapna Subramani and I'm your host for today. As we prepare for the Middle East Payment Security Summit on June 11th, we have a string of interesting people who we want to speak to and talk about information security across various verticals. Today, I have a very interesting person who I'm going to be speaking to. He is Mr. Rajesh Yadla, and who is the executive manager at a leading retail bank in UAE. Welcome, Mr. Rajesh. It's good to have you here.
Pleasure is mine, and thank you so much for inviting me for this podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. The pleasure is all ours. So if you can just give us a brief about your journey so far, Mr. Rajesh, and what brings you to the banking industry, where the bucks are, the financial industry. So just a little bit about your journey, what brings you here, and what are you looking for ahead?
So when it comes to my career, it's not a pretty straight line. I came from a non-technical background, completed my MSc in biochemistry and landed up in the first role as a technical call center agent. So it was not a most glamorous role at that point of time, but however, it has given me a really rock solid foundation where I can understand the technology, especially the network and network security.
Okay.
So later, I have progressed myself by learning more technical expertise by completing several certifications and moved to network security. Then, eventually the current the world cybersecurity and the risk management. I've got close to 16 years of experience in cybersecurity and technology side, all of which half of my career I spent in banking as an industry. I can share the experience during this podcast, how we can stay ahead of the current security threats and how we can work together to collaborate and enhance the security posture around the organization as well as the society as a whole.
Absolutely. And you must have seen, in your vast experience within information security, you must have seen a big change in the way information security is handled by various organizations. And of course, when it comes to the banking sector, it becomes extremely more, it's more of a fundamental issue because, there is a lot of privacy, you're dealing with sensitive data and so on. So what are some of the changes that you're seeing in information security overall and specifically in banking, throughout your experience?
Absolutely. I have seen a really big shift in terms of how organizations are handling the cybersecurity past decade or so. So the main thing that I can see in the cybersecurity world is that the approach the organizations are taking from proactive to reactive. From reactive to proactive side of it. The reason why I'm saying is if you look into it past 10 years before, when you have any ransomware attack, it used to be the security which comes to fix that ransomware issue.
Correct.
And we are not proactively ready to address the ransomware related issues in the past. So it used to be like security and IT scramble their head and try to identify how the ransomware got in and try to rebuild the systems to the end state to bring the operations back. But that scenario was really bad in terms of how the organizations can handle cybersecurity incidents.
Of course.
Example, it's really expensive for the organization to be in that state.
Cost of downtime.
Yeah, cost of downtime and time that is required to rebuild. Sometimes you may not be rebuild the systems into the original state. And the biggest issue was the reputational impact, right? Imagine you have a successful security incident in your organization. Now that's going to impact your brand name as well as the trust from the customer, whether they can keep their data into your organization.
Absolutely, yeah.
And finally, another big one is that it's going to impact your revenues because you are out of the business for some time. That has changed to proactive nature. Now, I would say most of the organizations, but especially the banks, we have the most proactive approach of dealing with cybersecurity by looking at the cybersecurity threats. When you're looking into threat intelligence, now we're trying to see what are the most active threats that are affecting not only the country but the industry itself. Like we come to know those threats. We will see what are the vulnerabilities in the organization, how we can actually mitigate them before attackers are going to materialize those vulnerabilities to compromise the systems. So it is mostly we're moving from reactive approach to the proactive side of it, and also the next one is that it used to be previously information security was isolated from rest of the business. So it used to be like when you have some information security issues, then the business come to the information security. Okay, guys, try to fix the issue. Then we have the problem. And also, it used to be like information security used to configure the firewalls and also like secure the perimeter of the organization, but it never actually integrated within the business processes.
Right.
That has been changed. Now most of the organizations are keeping their information security function directly reporting to the C-level executives, especially the CEO and CRO in the banking industry perspective. Also, we see the CISOs are now more interacting with the C-suite individuals in the organization to understand the business processes and look at how we can tightly integrate the cybersecurity practices into the business process itself. Mm-hmm. So that's a big shift that I see in the information security world. And finally, we have also seen another shift in terms of more than compliance-driven approach to the risk-based approach.
Yeah.
So previous days, it used to be like we used to implement so many controls and standards because it is required by the regulators. Mm-hmm. Now that has changed in a way that organizations are now looking at what are my critical assets and what are my critical risks, mm-hmm. and how do I see the threats to my organization. True. And how do I go ahead and fix those issues before they identified by the attackers. True. So that way we are mostly looking at the proactive side, ensuring that we protect the information systems of the organization from both internal and external threats.
Yeah, and you raise a very valid point, right? Because I think information security today has to be integrated as part of the overall system. A siloed approach cannot work, and the losses that can occur because of a breach can be quite catastrophic for a company. Data losses, financial losses, reputation losses as well. So, and it's good to see that change from like reactive to proactive as well. What do you think? What are your views on the latest version of the PCI DSS version 4.0? And what are your views on that? And how do you think that is going to help the the information security landscape?
Sure. Payment security standards from the PCI DSS, right? It's a really good control requirement until 3.2. We have now the PCI DSS 4.0, which was released in 2022 March. Now all the organizations which are handling the payment card data should be compliant to the new standard by March 25, if I'm not wrong. So what is the big change and shift in terms of looking at the standard is that from PCI DSS 3.0 was more focused on implementing the controls in the organization. So there is sometimes we have this issue that, okay, when you have a standard, we take the standard, we look at the checklist, we put the checklist and say, okay, have you implemented 1, 2, 3, 4 controls? Yes, we say tick, 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 tick. But now PCI DSS 4.0 came out of that practice. It is most outcome oriented rather than implementing the control.
Which is important.
So, which is really important. The reason why I'm saying is like previously, let's take an example of PCI DSS 3.2 requires to implement the multi-factor authentication. I can go ahead and implement the multi-factor authentication, first factor as a password, second factor as an OTP. It's good, right? Because I'm complying to the regulation that, okay, you need to implement the multi-factor authentication. But there is a catch. The OTP seems to be not so great second factor, because you can compromise the mobiles and you can see what is the OTP you're getting it on the mobile number, right?
SMS,
Yeah. So let's say PCI DSS 4.0, what they have done is they said that they informed to the organizations that, okay, let's look at the outcome of a particular requirement rather than implementing the control itself.
Right.
So it's giving more flexibility to the organization to implement even good security tools and technologies to safeguard
Which could
the
be out of
systems.
the box, but still
Yes.
giving that outcome.
Exactly. So now the same example, if you go back to the multi-factor authentication, now organizations have the flexibility to implement biometric as a secondary factor authentication,
Okay.
which is much more effective than the traditional OTP methodology.
Okay.
So what PCIDSS 4.0 is saying is that, okay, guys, once you implement the control, it's not only implement the control, also look at what is the outcome of that control. Is it really protected? You are flexible to implement as long as you secure your environment with the most sophisticated security control available there. Second thing that I can see is we also PCIDSS 4.0 moved from it is emphasizing more on risk-based methodology, meaning that, okay, as an organization, we are aware of what is our critical data.
Okay.
So what flexibility that PCIDSS 4.0 is giving to the organizations is that, okay, go ahead and do your risk assessment, understand your threats, and prioritize your risks, and focus your security efforts on those risks which are really critical to your organization, rather than considering all the risks together and equal in the organization. So that's a really good shift as well. And whenever we're looking at any new regulation comes in, we need to look at both advantages and disadvantages perspective. I should not say disadvantages. I should say that challenges to meet the compliance. Now, another good thing that PCIDSS 4.0 has done is that now they are also focusing more on service providers.
Okay.
Ensuring that the service providers also should have this equal controls to protect the payment card data. It is a very, very good approach. The reason is, when a merchant is passing the information to service provider, it is the service provider also should ensure that the card data is protected in the overall ecosystem. So that benefits everyone in the ecosystem as a whole, right? So next one is when you're looking at the challenges. Now, what you see as a challenge is the transition costs.
Yeah.
Because PCIDSS 4 is great, but in order to be compliant or more sophisticated with this control, you need to implement technological aspects as well as process changes.
Yeah.
And also you might have to acquire the new resources, because
Of course.
they're very important to comply with the standard for a longer period of time. So that puts the pressure on small and medium companies. Banks are fine because we are
Cash rich.
cash rich, and we are most regulated entities in the region.
Of course.
So we have the appetite to spend that money for the security controls. But the small and medium-sized organizations might face some challenges of meeting these requirements in terms of the costs, and the second one is the resources.
True.
So I would say PCIDSS 4.0 is a step in the right direction.
Okay.
The reason is that they are ensuring that organizations will have a greater security posture in order to secure the payment card data, not only within the organization but entire ecosystem.
Ecosystem-based approach.
Yeah. So that gives an advantage and gives that confidence for the customer to do the transactions.
True. And you mentioned challenges specifically for small and medium organizations, but overall, like within the banking sector, what do you think are some of the key challenges that are faced in preventing security breaches? Because like we know of the common ones, where people try to get each other's data and so on. But then, as a person who is heading the information security department, for your bank, what are some of the key challenges that you face in ensuring that there are no security breaches?
Certainly. Banks are really good in spending a lot of money on cybersecurity, that's for sure.
Okay.
But can we say that we are the most secure organizations in the ecosystem? It's a very tough answer to a question to answer.
Yeah.
The reason is that whenever we are improving our security posture, and we see that even the threat actors also increasing and getting more sophisticated. So that gives the pressure to us to continue to monitor, evaluate, and reassess our processes and technology to meet the current security demands of the organization. So the key challenges that we see is mainly the digitalization, right? Moving to the cloud. We used to have a very self-contained environment where everything can be controlled by the cybersecurity and IT individuals, but that is shifting towards the cloud. I'm not saying cloud is bad, but the problem is that we have much more challenges in the cloud.
It increases, like it adds a whole different layer of like complication, sophistication as well. But with that, the challenges come. So
yeah. So what we see when it comes to the challenges, we have advanced towards to the remediation of those issues that we see in the cloud as well. To name a few, let's say banks are normally looking at the continuous security testing. So we ensure that our environment and perimeter is secure from the attacks, and we do it very frequently, so that we'll know that what are the vulnerabilities out there, where the attackers can materialize them and compromise the systems and try to mitigate those vulnerabilities as soon as possible. And when it comes to the cloud and digitalization perspective, we have DevOps. Okay. Right. So there are a lot of open source libraries are used in DevOps. So we integrated security into the DevOps lifecycle by bringing the solutions to ensure that whenever we use the open source libraries, those are scanned and identified vulnerabilities and replace them with a non-vulnerable open source libraries in the software development lifecycle itself. DevSecOps is something that banks are achieving at this point of time. Also, the third one is the most important one that I would say is the API security. Of course. So at the current situation, most of our interactions are based on APIs.
Since you're a retail bank, of course.
Yes. And even we are integrating ourselves with the third parties through the API. So it is very important that we need to know what kind of vulnerabilities are there in the APIs and what kind of attacks that you see, that you can anticipate from API related technology. So I would say we have a challenge, and we are working towards to monitor those APIs, ensuring that they are secure from the attacks. So API security is another important challenge and an opportunity that we can work with it.
Yeah.
So finally, I would say that whenever we are, I would say information security is something like a continuous improvement rather than...
It's a journey.
It's a journey rather than a target posture, right? Because whenever there is a change in your business processes,
which is continuous, change is continuous.
So that's why I see there are challenges, but I think we are working on those challenges, probably because of the regulation and regulatory requirements, and since we are one of the heavily regulated bodies in UAE, so that gives us the opportunity to implement the security technologies as soon as possible to mitigate these cybersecurity threats.
Okay. And so just flipping that question then, we talked about challenges and of course with the growing sophistication of technology, and you have to change with the changing technology and digitally transform and all of that. So it comes with its challenges, but according to you, what are some of the best practices then that as the leading bank you have implemented, and you would like to tell our viewers on what would be some of those best practices that they should consider implementing?
Sure. The one thing that I would always say that try to be risk aware. So how risk management is one of my favorite topic. It gives opportunity to be much more,
Prevention.
Proactive, instead of waiting for some threat to come and compromise your infrastructure.
So like risk assessment, like continuous risk assessment.
Yes. So I would say that every organization should have a very robust risk management framework. In order to achieve the risk management framework itself, first, every company should be aware of what are their critical assets.
True.
And we cannot boil the ocean, right? It has to be something like we need to understand what is actually matters to the organization.
True.
And what is the critical crown jewels of the organization. Let's try to protect them first.
Okay.
And rest of the other infrastructure, yes, we can implement the control, but we can have moderate controls on them, but you need to absolutely protect your crown jewels of the organization.
Okay.
So I would say first, understand your business process. That's very important. And the second one is to understand your critical assets, where the business processes are using the data and the resources in order to generate the revenues. Those are the critical services that we need to protect in the organization.
Okay.
And perform the threat analysis. We would say that, as I said, standards give the list of security controls, but the kind of threats every organization faces is different from other organizations because it depends on the kind of services that you're providing to the customers, kind of data that you're handling in the organization. So doing a threat analysis is very important, and understand the threats to your organization. Once you understand the threats, look at the likelihood of this threat can compromise your infrastructure and a kind of impact that it brings to the organization. So when there is a likelihood high and impact is high, those are the threats that we need
needs
to
focus.
Right. And you need to put your security efforts as well as investments in order to mitigate or reduce that risk aspect of these critical risks. So that's one important thing. Other one, I would say that continuous improvement. There is no silver bullet. I love silver bullets. If there is something out there which I can use it to mitigate all the cybersecurities in the world, but however, we don't have silver bullets. So it's always that we need to continuously assess and understand the changes of the threats and how it's going to impact your own organization, and ensure that we improve our security posture in order to combat these security threats out there. Third one that I would say is the internal threats, which are normally ignored by most of us. So it is very, very important for the organizations now to understand the internal threats and look at we never touched on these AI, but I still feel that AI is still out there, but not so mature in the security world. But utilizing at least the machine learning algorithms to see the patterns of each and every behavior in the organization and look for the anomalies and the suspicious behavior out of the
people and processes.
People, processes, and even the technological communication. So that's very important for an organization to look at what is my base profile and how it is deviating and why it is deviating it. If it's deviating, such thing is something like suspicious, let's try to respond and try to mitigate them before it becomes an incident. That's something I see is a very important aspect that every organization should say.
Yeah. And I think, everything that you said, sounds like a very structured and logical approach and holistic approach to security. Information security is so important, not just for banks, but then across, all industries, because the pace of technology change is so fast, and with AI and machine learning and all, there's just added levels of complexity. So the more you kind of get to the grassroots of the problem, identify your assets, identify your risks, and then make a plan to like mitigate it well. And that sounds like a really logical approach. I'm sure it's harder than easier said than done.
Yeah,
but I think that's an important message, from today's podcast for everybody to take on. So that's all the questions that I had for you today. And any final thoughts on this podcast, or and would you have more to say of course during the payment summit?
Yeah, I really want to thank you for the team to welcoming me for this podcast. It is something pretty useful, not only for me to learn,
of course.
Also
we're all learning. I learned a lot.
Yeah, everybody is learning. That's a really good thing.
Yeah.
The final thoughts is that the world is going to be a little different in the upcoming future.
Absolutely.
Out of this AI and all these chat GPTs, whatever we are seeing in the world. So I would say that we need to be more collaborative.
Yes.
To combat. I always used to say in all my presentations that if you look at last year's, how much was the impact from the cyber breaches, it was $4 trillion, right? So literally all of us are actually combating against this $4 trillion economy. So it is very important for us when these threats are really sophisticated. It's very difficult to recognize and identify by one particular individual or an organization. So I think better collaboration is something that that is very key. Probably we see it much more effective in the future, and especially for the banks. We have a really tight integration in terms of how we share our threat intel. We have this platform where one bank is affected with a particular threat that we normally publish in the platform, and all the other banks can get the benefit out of it and be ready and be protected against those threats.
Okay.
I think I would see much more such collaboration is needed in order to combat really effectively with the ever-evolving cyber threats in the world.
The parallel economy that we are all challenged with. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Rajesh. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
And then I'm sure the audience would like to hear more from you. And for that, you can stay tuned and we have a lot more coming up. And of course, the Middle East Payment Summit, where you'll get to see and hear a lot more on this subject. Till then, thank you for staying tuned and take care. Bye-bye.